The Life of St. Augustine by St. Possidius. Part 5. Chapter 18. Heretics of the new Pelagian sect overcome and condemned. Against the Pelagians also, new heretics of our time, and skilful debaters who wrote with an art even more subtle and noxious, and spoke whenever they could, in public and in homes, against these he labored for almost 10 years, writing and publishing many books, and very frequently arguing in the church with people of that error. When they perversely tried through their flattery to persuade the Apostolic See of their false doctrine, it was most positively resolved by successive African councils of holy bishops, first to convince the venerable Innocent, the holy pope of that city, and his successor, the holy Zosimus, that this sect ought to be abominated and condemned by the Catholic faith. And the bishops of that great see at various times censured them and cut them off from membership in the church, and, in letters sent to the African churches of the West and to the churches of the East, decreed that they should be anathematized and shunned by all Catholics. When the most pious Emperor Honorius heard of this judgment, which had been passed upon them by the Catholic Church of God, influenced by it, he in turn decreed that they should be condemned by his laws, and should be regarded as heretics. Accordingly, some of them returned to the bosom of the Holy Mother Church, from which they had withdrawn, and others are still returning, as the truth of the right faith shines forth, and prevails against the detestable error. The memorable man, a noble member of the Lord's body, was ever solicitous and watchful for the advantage of the universal Church. To him it was divinely granted that from the fruit of his labors he should find joy even in this life. First, because unity and peace were established in the part of the Church around Hippo, over which he had special jurisdiction, and then in the other parts of Africa, either by his own efforts or by others, and through priests whom he himself had furnished. Moreover, he found joy in seeing the Church of the Lord increase and multiply, and in seeing the Manichaeans, Donatists, Pelagians, and pagans, for the most part diminishing and becoming united with the Church of God. He also delighted in the pursuit of his studies, and rejoiced in all good. In kindness he bore with the shortcomings of his brethren, and mourned over the iniquities of the wicked, whether of those within the Church or of those without, always rejoicing, as I said, in the Lord's gains, and sorrowing over his losses. And so many things were dictated by him and published by him, and so many things were discussed in the Church, written down and amended, whether against various heretics or expounded from the canonical books for the edification of the holy sons of the Church, that scarcely any student would be able to read and know them all. However, lest we seem in any way to deprive those who are very eager for the truth of his word, I have determined with the aid of God to add also an indiculus bibliography of these books, homilies, and epistles at the end of this little work. When those who love the truth of God more than temporal riches have read this, each may choose for himself what he wishes to read. And in order to copy them, let him seek them either from the library of the Church of Hippo, where the more perfect copies can probably be found, or search wherever else he can. And when he has found them, let him copy and preserve them, and also lend them willingly to anyone who wishes to make copies. Chapter 19. Augustine as Judge. According also to the teaching of the Apostle, who said, Dare any of you, having a matter against another, go to law before the unjust, and not before the saints? Do you not know that the saints shall judge the world? And if the world shall be judged by you, are you unworthy to judge the smallest matters? Know ye not that we shall judge angels? How much more things that pertain to this life? If ye have judgments of things pertaining to this life, set them to judge who are least in the church. I speak to your shame. Is it so, that there is not a wise man among you? No, not one that shall be able to judge between his brethren? But brother goes to law against brother, and that before the unbelievers. Accordingly, when Augustine was importuned by Christians, or by men of any sect, he heard their cases carefully and dutifully, keeping before his eyes the remark of a certain one who said that he preferred to hear cases between strangers rather than between friends. For of the strangers he could gain the one as a friend, in whose favor the case was justly decided, whereas he would lose one of his friends, against whom judgment was passed. Though they sometimes kept him even till meal-time, and sometimes he even had to fast all day, yet he always examined these cases and passed judgment on them, considering in them the value of Christian souls, in how far each had increased or decreased in faith and good works. When opportunities occurred, he instructed both parties in the truth of the divine law, impressing it upon them and reminding them of the way by which they might obtain eternal life. He asked no other reward from those for whom he spent his time in this way, except the Christian obedience and devotion which is due to God and man, rebuking the sinner before all, that others also might fear. He did this as one whom the Lord made a watchman unto the house of Israel, preaching the word, instant, in season, out of season, reproving, rebuking, exhorting, with all long-suffering and doctrine. And he took special pains to instruct those who were able to teach others. On request, he also wrote letters to some concerning their temporal cases. But this work, which took him away from better things, he regarded as a kind of conscription, for his pleasure was always in the things of God, or in the exhortation or conversation of intimate brotherly friendship. Chapter 20. How he interceded for prisoners. We know also that when his most intimate friends asked him for letters of intercession to the civil authorities, he did not give them, saying that it was wise to observe the rule of a certain sage, of whom it was written that, out of great regard for his own reputation, he would not be responsible for his friends. But Augustine added the remark, which was, however, his own, that this was a good rule, because often the authority which is petitioned afterward becomes oppressive. But if when he was asked for it he perceived that intercession was necessary, he did it with such sincerity and tact that not only did he not appear irritating and annoying, but rather seemed admirable. For when one case of necessity arose, and in his usual manner he interceded by letter with a vicar of Africa, Macedonius by name, on behalf of a suppliant, Macedonius granted the request, and sent him an answer in this wise: I am struck with wonder at your wisdom, both in the books you have published, and in the letter which you have not found it too great a burden to send me, by way of intercession for those in distress. For the former writings, my venerable lord and esteemed father, possess a discernment, wisdom, and holiness which leave nothing to be desired, and the latter, such modesty that, unless I do as you request, I could not regard myself as remaining free from blame in the matter. You do not insist, like most men in your position, on extorting all that the suppliant asked, but what seemed to you fair to ask of a judge occupied with many cares, this you advise, with a humble modesty which is most efficacious in settling difficulties among good men. Consequently, I have not hesitated to grant your request as you recommended, and as I had given you reason to expect. Chapter 21. His frame of mind when attending councils. Whenever he was able, Augustine attended the councils of the holy priests, which were held throughout the various provinces, seeking in them, not his own, but the things of Jesus Christ, that the faith of the Holy Catholic Church might remain inviolate, or that some priests and clergy who had been justly or unjustly excommunicated might be either absolved or rejected. In the ordination of priests and clergy, he thought that the agreement of the majority of Christians and the custom of the Church ought to be followed. End of Part 5.